A federal judge has put a temporary halt on plans to open a horse slaughter plant here in New Mexico and Iowa. There has been no such facility for 7 years in the U.S., but U.S. District Judge Christina Armijo issued a restraining order in a lawsuit brought by the Humane Society of the United States and other groups. The issue has divided rescue groups, native tribes, ranchers, and politicians over the best way to deal with a huge overpopulation of horses here. And Rob, I'm going to start with you on this one. You were at that hearing last Friday. Do us a favor, a quick recap, 20 seconds, of where the judge was coming from, where both sides are coming up, HSUS and the animal rights, and the animal pro-slaughter.
Judge Armijo, the U.S. District Court judge, issued a temporary restraining order. And I think it surprised a number of observers there. In fact, it was interesting afterwards. We reporters interviewed the attorney from the Humane Society, and I asked him, I said, were you surprised that you got the temporary restraining order? And he admitted, he says, yeah, I was a little bit surprised, because the bar is very, very high. And a lot of the thrust of the argument from the Humane Society was we think by prior examples that this is going to have environmental problems. And that was the small scope. It was not an ethical discussion about slaughtering horses. And but it was based on, this is what we think is going to happen. And I think a lot of observers were thinking that the judge might say, I might sympathize with you, but I don't think you've reached that threshold.
So as we stand now, there's a 30-day stay, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, there's a bond hearing going on, and the people from the Valley Meat Company want $10 million in bond, because they say that this is going to affect their economic well-being. The judge will have another hearing in about 30 days. The bottom line, I think that if people want to know whether they're in favor or against it, how long will it take before Valley Meat could possibly be opening up? And their own attorney told me last week that he says 6 months at the minimum.
Oh, interesting. So because the word was they were ready to go last Monday when this thing was going to be.
But they had this roadblock. There's another roadblock because the state environmental department has questions about their use, I think, of wastewater.
That's right.
So I mean, there's a lot of hurdles for these guys to overcome, and I think maybe one of the other questions would be, are there so many hurdles that eventually they throw in the towel?
That's a good point. Senator, that's an interesting place to pick up, because for the longest time, the Valley Meat Company was putting it out there. This is kind of a cruise. We've got 120 jobs on the brink, all this kind of thing. But the environmental stuff, now the Attorney General has weighed in on that as well, has changed the game here a little bit. What's your sense about where we sit now with this?
Well, I think the environmental stuff is a problem and is a concern, and it should have been a concern from day one, regardless of how long it takes to resolve it. We have extensive licensing requirements for feedlots, for other kinds of facilities, and why this one should skate without any kind of examination of the air pollution, the noise pollution, the water pollution, and all of those impacts is something I never understood. Did they have a blanket exception?
Seems like everyone caught on to this very late in the process, isn't it? It's interesting.
Well, I'm not sure why. It's a facility that could have a lot of environmental implications.
Sure, and Tripp, to amplify what the senator is saying, the facts of the matter are somewhat gruesome, but a horse, when you render a horse, you really only can use about 60% of it. There's an awful lot of horse left over. It has twice as much blood in each horse as a cow. So we're talking about these huge holding ponds with all this blood and all this waste that has bute and other things that are harmful to humans and other animals. And how one deals with this down the road without having a solid plan, as the senator was saying, seems to be a reasonable question that folks would have, wouldn't it?
It seems reasonable in the sense that, do they have, what kind of holding capacity do they have, and what do they use? How do they promise that it doesn't leach into the groundwater? In some ways, this is, I don't know all the particulars of this particular issue. I've followed it, but it does seem that there are some analogous issues to oil and gas in the sense of leaching and stuff like that. So environmentally, I don't know all the agents they put in horses. I think there were like 40, is that right? 40,
around there, yeah.
40.
Yeah.
And what that means for human beings, and does water dissolve that potential for? There's some really interesting questions here.
Right.
I do think the political discussion is the framing is very interesting. Jobs in a oppressed area versus environmental and ethical concerns. And this is something that I think, that those of us who cover policy are interested in these kind of discussions, because you have some really interesting, compelling arguments, I think, arguments that are very interesting on all sides here.
Interesting tension point, isn't it? It's a
It
classic,
is.
isn't
It
it?
is.
I'm glad you mentioned the politics, because Laura, I wanted to bring this up. It's interesting now that the tribes are weighing in. This has been an issue for those that follow this issue, and I again must disclose I'm in a relationship with someone who's on the side of not having horse slaughter. She's working officially in that capacity. But the tribes weighing in is interesting, because there are estimates of between 20,000 and 70,000 feral horses on Navajo Nation land. And one can understand their will to deal with that problem through slaughter. But what does that do to the politics now that the tribes have weighed in on this?
Well, I mean, I think it complicates it further, certainly. I mean, it's a very complicated issue. But one thing I did want to address, this issue of jobs versus environment is not a new one. And it's, to me, a false dichotomy, because it's something that is created by those who want to push forward with business without taking into consideration the environmental impact. And my organization stands for, trying to incorporate a sustainable plan and think about the environmental impact and the long-term viability of a business plan as part of your advantage. So I think that when we set up those dichotomies, they're often interesting, but they're false in many ways. I think it's important that a good business person take into consideration what the environmental impacts will be from the start, and I think that's what's missing in this situation.
Right.
What's interesting to me in this is that NEPA's been around for a long time. It's been used to make sure that we are environmentally responsible for a wide number of projects. I think in this case, the interesting thing to point out, the important thing to point out, is that this is an action where the criticism is against USDA for having moved forward without doing this environmental review that they're supposed to do. Any federal agency doing a permit approval process, they have to make sure that they incorporate the NEPA protections and follow that process, and they simply didn't in this case. And there's also the issue of not having enough an inspection process at USDA. So I think there was pressure on USDA to approve this, maybe by the business interests, without taking into consideration this broader NEPA process that they have to follow.
Right. 30 seconds left, Rob. One of the interesting little tidbits is federally, Laura mentioned, we have the SAFE Act out there, Safeguard American Food Exports Act, that's sitting in both the House and the Senate and not moving quite yet. So there's a federal end to this as well. Does this mean the walls are, I don't want you to put out too much of an opinion, are the walls closing in on these guys? What's the sense of it here? There's not a lot of wiggle room as the weeks go by.
Again, the politics of this,
Yeah.
even though the USDA approved this and they were arguing for it last week in court, Tom Vilsack, who's the head of the USDA, is against this. So there's a growing feeling that there's almost a stalling tactic.
Right.
The more time that's going to be involved here, then the federal government can step in and put in a ban for horse
I
slaughter.
think that might be right, too. Now, we're back soon with a look at a report that claims New Mexico is hurting job growth by demanding too many occupational licenses. Stay with us.